representative of Israel.
Thank you, Madam President. First, I would like to address Mr. Mansour's words about Resolution 2735. You haven't mentioned an important sentence about the release of the hostages. That's why we are sitting in this room, because that's what started the war, is the kidnapping of Israeli civilians. And I'm really disappointed, Mr. Mansour, not from Hamas. We had no expectations from Hamas, but from you and from the Palestinian Authority.
Est-ce que je peux répéter?
Could I repeat what I said at the beginning of the meeting, please, that the Security Council is a place of respect, and I call upon all speakers to respect appropriate standards in terms of time, choice of words and content in their remarks. And we don't interrupt each other. Thank you. I ask you to continue.
And I'm disappointed not from the Hamas. We have no expectations from Hamas. We know they are savages. But the Palestinian Authority, you are the moderate, the educated, and you are not capable after a year to say we condemn the atrocities of October 7th, we condemn Hamas, and it makes us wonder about the future, about ideas, but you are not able to say that. Neither President Abbas in the General Assembly, not one word. And Israelis are watching us. You mentioned the Palestinians, but also Israelis are watching us, and they're asking themselves, is there a difference between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority? When 70% of Palestinians in Judea and Samaria support the atrocities of October 7th? And I think that, yes, we want to see a day when there will be peace. But for that to happen, you have to make a distinction between evil and good, and you don't do that, Mr. Mansour. Madam President, it has now been 1 year since the darkest day in Israel's history, the October 7 massacre, a day when innocent lives were brutally taken, a day that scarred an entire nation. Over the past year, Israel has endured unimaginable pain. Families continue to grieve, not only for those they lost, but for those who remain in the grip of Hamas, held as hostages in Gaza. I would like to thank the Council members who joined us on Monday for the commemoration of this horrific event. At that event, you heard the heart-wrenching stories of the families of the victims. You listened to a mother who was here at the UN. She told the story about her 2 daughters who were murdered at the Nova Music Festival. She will never walk her daughters down the aisle, never again feel their warm embrace. You heard the story from a rabbi whose son's body is still held by Hamas's terrorists. He endured over 160 days of not knowing whether his son is alive, and he shared with us that his wife felt a sense of relief from the news of his death, because she told him that at least the pain was now only theirs to experience. Then we heard from a Muslim, Bedouin Israeli, who shared his horrid experience with a brother who remains a living hostage in the Hamas terror dungeons. And it's not only Jews. You have Christians, Muslims, not only Israelis, that are being held today by Hamas. In these stories, you saw the full extent of Hamas's depravity, a terror organization that makes no distinctions. They do not care about age, religion, or nationality. Their mission is singular, to murder everyone. Colleagues, some of you in this chamber support Israel's firm position that Hamas cannot remain in the ruling regime in Gaza. Others remain in the middle, indifferent. And tragically, some even offer their support to Hamas and its murderous objectives. However, if any of the Council members want these discussions to be productive, to reap any sort of benefit, every conversation should center around the simple truth. The future of Gaza must be a future without Hamas. We can discuss other options, but we have to agree about that. And I want you, Mr. Mansour, to discuss this idea and acknowledge that no future for Gaza if Hamas is there. We know what happened to your colleagues from the PA when they were ruling Gaza when Hamas took over. We know why you and President Abbas haven't visited Gaza for more than a decade, because you know what will happen to you there. We must start to envision Gaza freed from the clenched grip of terror. What would it look like? How would it work? How could Gaza thrive when it is free of this destructive regime? I, myself, and many Israelis, we have a vision for Gaza without Hamas. Aid would finally reach those who truly need it. You spoke about the aid. Do you know that in one day, about 50% of the trucks were hijacked by Hamas? I haven't heard that from the distinguished reporters we heard today. 50%, not one or two trucks, 50% being hijacked. In the future, the trucks carrying that aid would no longer be violently hijacked. Money intended for civilian welfare would not be diverted by terrorists. The money being donated would be poured into schools and hospitals, not weapons. The fuel sent to Gaza would be used in homes for cooking, not for launching rockets. Concrete would be used to build highways, not terror tunnels. Hamas had exploited the suffering of its people, using the misery in Gaza as a propaganda tool while they line their pockets and boost their arsenals. Our vision of Gaza is not an impossible dream. It is within reach. But it cannot happen while Hamas remains in control, diverting aid, exploiting resources, and worsening the suffering of their own people. On October 7 this year, 2 days ago, Hamas fired several rockets into civilian areas in Israel. The fact that this fight is not over, unfortunately. The Israel Defense Forces will continue to operate until all the objectives of this war are met, until Hamas's military capabilities are dismantled and all our hostages returned. Madam President, despite the ongoing threats from 7 fronts, despite the unspeakable atrocities committed against our people, Israel's humanitarian efforts in Gaza have been nothing short of extraordinary. The facts are clear. Over 52,000 trucks have entered Gaza under Israeli coordination, delivering more than 1 million tons of aid, 700,000 tons of it being food. Israel imposes no restrictions on humanitarian aid. In fact, 82% of all requests for humanitarian coordination have been approved and implemented. Our humanitarian coordination covers a broad range of needs as they arise. And yes, we work with UN agencies. We have worked closely with global partners like WHO and UNICEF to vaccinate over 500,000 Gazan children against polio in a matter of weeks. The second stage of the vaccination campaign is commencing next week. This is a cooperation we strive for with our partners. We are willing and able to work on the ground. Additionally, we have expanded the El Mawasi humanitarian area, both inside and facilities, with an increased supply of food, water, and medical equipment. Now, compare our efforts to the failures of UNRWA. While Israel cooperates with international organizations like WHO and UNICEF to improve the lives of civilians, UNRWA Gaza has allowed Hamas to infiltrate its ranks. This infiltration is so ingrained, so institutional, that the organization is simply beyond repair. The contrast could not be clearer. While Israel fights to protect and uplift civilians, UNRWA's leave them and allow them to suffer. Israel has been warning for months about the infiltration of Hamas into UNRWA, yet not significant action has been taken. And I haven't heard the distinguished gentleman from UNRWA, when he spoke about the casualties, how many of them were affiliated with Hamas. We gave the names to UNRWA. The recent revelation that Fatah Sharif, Hamas's commander in Lebanon this time, he was also an UNRWA school principal, believe it or not, a principal, and he was the head of its teachers' union, the head of Hamas in Lebanon. That's beyond imagination. This is not merely a failure of oversight. This is the absurd reality we are facing. An organization that claims to provide education and humanitarian aid has been infiltrated to the point where terrorists are running classrooms, indoctrinating future generations, and hiding in plain sight under the banner of the United Nations. Distinguished Council members, we have debated this issue in circles for months, to no avail. The focus of these discussions must shift from the symptoms to the disease itself, the Islamic regime of Iran. Today, we discuss the humanitarian situation in Gaza. Tomorrow, we will have a discussion about Lebanon. What will be next? Yemen? Iraq? We all know the true cause of the suffering is Tehran's desire for supremacist expansion. Iran's aggression continues unrestricted. Just last week, Iran launched hundreds of missiles in the largest ballistic attack in history. In history. No state in the world would tolerate such assaults on its people, and Israel will not tolerate it either. We will choose when and where our response takes place. It will be decisive, and we will not hesitate to defend ourselves. 1 year has passed since the October 7 massacre. 1 year of pain, mourning, and resilience. Yet, what have we learned in that time? Have we truly confronted the evil that seeks to destroy us? Or are we still debating, still pointing fingers? And I agree with you, Mr. Mansour. We come here, you blame Israel, we blame you. I agree with you. While the origin of all this suffering, the real evil, Hamas, Hezbollah, and their puppet masters in Tehran, continue to sow terror and death. This body must move beyond the surface and address the deeper disease that has plagued the region for far too long. Words alone will not end the situation in Gaza or anywhere else. Only decisive, collective action can root out the terrorists and bring about a future of peace and security for all. Israel will not wait. We will defend our people, our land, and our future. We stand as guardians of the very principle that this body was built to protect. It has been 1 year since the massacre of October 7. We cannot afford another. Thank you, Madam President.
Je remercie le représentant.
Thanks for watching. Drop a comment below. Don't forget to like, share, and hit subscribe to stay updated with our latest content. Until next time, stay informed and inspired. This is DaJobnik signing off.